You're watching Eerie Escapes.
Have you ever felt the hairs on the back of your neck rise as your own imagination seems to leap out of the page and into reality? My name is Jason, a journalist who sought refuge from the incessant city life in a remote cottage, hoping to create a novel in the quiet solitude. But as my characters began to spring to life in the most unsettling way, the tranquility I sought became a terrifying ordeal. I invite you to walk with me through the uncanny events that turned my sabbatical in Kingsworth into an eerie confrontation with an antagonist that was supposed to exist only in the realm of fiction. The cottage I chose was undeniably old, its facades showing clear signs of aging, and its interior amenities far from luxurious. Yet it was secluded and promisingly quiet, fitting my budget and my requirements perfectly. Upon arrival, the first few days were just as I had hoped. I basked in the calm, savored the absence of the city's clamor, and slowly started to settle into the solitude. This tranquility facilitated my writing, and I found myself pouring hours into my novel, immersed in my story, my characters coming alive under the strokes of my pen. However, after the first week, I started experiencing peculiarities. The charm of the isolation began to warp subtly into a disconcerting sense of loneliness. The cottage that initially seemed rustic started to feel decrepit, and an inexplicable sense of dread began to seep into me, gradually at first, then more insistently. Every morning I noticed the presence of peculiar symbols etched onto the wooden surface of my writing table. Initially they seemed like harmless abrasions or even the capricious patterns in the wood grain. But as days progressed, these symbols became more distinct, more precise. They started to eerily mimic the descriptions of locations, events, and characters in my novel. Disturbed, I tried to dismiss it as an eccentric coincidence, perhaps my mind playing tricks on me, fueled by the isolation. But just as I was struggling to come to terms with these inexplicable occurrences, the situation escalated. The antagonist in my novel, a dark, daunting character named Victor, started to feel alarmingly real. One quiet evening, while I was engrossed in detailing a particularly tense scene involving Victor, I heard a faint whisper. It seemed to originate from within the cottage itself, a deep, gravelly voice ominously growling the name of my protagonist, the very name I had just written in my story. Startled, I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribcage. I found myself staring at nothing but the familiar empty room, its corners gently illuminated by the warm glow of my desk lamp. I attempted to rationalize the occurrence, attributing it to an overactive imagination brought on by my solitary circumstances and the unsettling nature of my narrative. However, the seed of dread had been planted and refused to be uprooted. In the days that followed, I could never shake off the feeling of an unseen presence, of no longer being alone. Every time I sat down to write, I would hear soft whispers swirling around me, feel an inexplicable chilly breeze, and perceive elusive shadows flicker in my peripheral vision. A creeping sense of unease washed over me, and I began to feel like I was not the author anymore, but a character, trapped within my own unsettling narrative. Things came to a head one evening when I was outlining a scene where Victor forcibly enters the protagonist's home. Just as I completed the scene, a resounding crash echoed from the downstairs area of the cottage. The noise mirrored the actions I had just written, its terrifyingly accurate timing sending chills down my spine. The fear was immediate, raw, and unlike anything I'd felt before. I couldn't dismiss it as my imagination anymore. I grabbed my essentials and fled the cottage, not daring to look back. Now I find myself a few towns over, typing this account from the modest comfort of a roadside motel. My heart still flutters nervously as I relive the memories. I've chosen to share my experience because I'm at a loss. I can't discern if I'm losing my grip on reality, if the solitude finally got to me, or if there's something genuinely sinister about that decrepit cottage. What I do know is that whatever was happening felt terrifyingly real and undeniably focused on me. Following weeks of restless nights and persistent anxiety, my desire to understand the strange occurrences at the cottage overpowered my initial fear. I realized that running away was not the answer. As a journalist, my instinct was to seek the truth, and this situation was no different. I knew I had to return to Kingsworth, to the cottage that had once promised solitude but delivered something far more sinister. I prepared myself both mentally and physically for the confrontation, packed my bag, and embarked on the journey back. The familiar path to the village felt like a journey into the unknown this time, but I was resolute. Arriving at the cottage felt like stepping into a chilling narrative once again. It stood just as I remembered it, with its worn-out facade subtly hinting at the mysteries it housed. The unsettling silence that once welcomed me now seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the story to unfold. In daylight, the cottage was devoid of any obvious oddities. The wooden table bore the same intricate symbols etched into its surface, their eeriness somewhat diminished in the bright afternoon sun. It felt almost peaceful, and I found myself questioning my previous experience. I decided to resume my writing, the unfinished story still looming in my mind. As my pen met the paper, I felt the same icy chill that used to accompany the whispers. I braced myself, ready for the whispers or fleeting shadows, but all remained quiet. Days turned into weeks. The symbols on the table began evolving once again, closely mimicking my writings. The sense of dread started creeping back in. However, this time I was prepared. I kept writing, pushing the boundaries, challenging the unseen entity that had haunted me. Then Victor resurfaced, his menacing aura transcending from the paper into the room. I had written a scene where Victor comes face to face with the protagonist, a confrontation filled with threatening whispers and tension. That night, the whispers returned, louder and clearer than ever. I could almost feel Victor's presence in the room, a dark, oppressive force that threatened to shatter the fragile peace. Despite the terror surging within me, I didn't flee. I grabbed my voice recorder, determined to document the eerie whispers. I sat there, heart pounding, pen poised, waiting for the impending chaos to unfold. And then it did. A loud crash, identical to the one that had driven me away before, echoed through the cottage. Shadows flickered, whispers crescendoed into an inhuman growl. Fear threatened to consume me, but I stood my ground. I refused to let the fear win. I continued recording, capturing every sound that filled the air. The confrontation was brief yet terrifying. The shadows dissipated, the whispers faded, and once again I was left alone with nothing but silence and the chilling evidence on my recorder. The eerie occurrences never ceased completely. Every night the whispers would echo, the shadows would dance, and the symbols would change. However, they no longer sparked fear but a curious fascination. I found myself drawn into this supernatural anomaly, documenting it, studying it. I'm still here in the heart of Kingsworth, living and writing in a cottage that straddles the line between the real and the surreal. I share this tale not as a warning, but as a revelation of a world that exists beyond our understanding, and of a journalist who unwittingly became its part. The fear hasn't entirely left, but it's now accompanied by a burning desire to unearth the truth. I have become both the author and the protagonist in this inexplicable narrative, ready to face the enigma that is Victor.
Ever since I discovered urban exploration, I've felt drawn to the silent, forgotten corners of our cities. My name's Alex, and I'm part of a small group of explorers who share this fascination. Last weekend, our curiosity led us to an infamous site, an abandoned metro station that had been shrouded in mysteries and urban legends for decades. The station, which locals referred to as the Underbelly, was located in our city's outskirts and had been shut down following a string of disappearances back in the 70s. Public records about the incident were minimal, and the case was soon forgotten by the city. However, its dark history made it a point of interest for explorers like us. Equipped with our flashlights, cameras, and a hefty dose of courage, we embarked on our expedition late at night to avoid any unnecessary attention. The initial part of our exploration was eerily quiet, with nothing but the echo of our footsteps and the occasional distant rumbling of active trains in nearby lines. The old tracks, unused platforms, and empty tunnels felt like a dystopian time capsule, a stark contrast to the vibrant city above. As we ventured deeper, we noticed a change in the atmosphere. It became colder, and an odd, stifling sensation hung in the air. The tunnels grew darker. The graffiti that had been our constant companion in the upper levels gave way to untouched walls, and a deafening silence set in. We soon came across a tunnel that wasn't documented in any of the old metro blueprints we'd sourced. Curiosity piqued. We decided to explore it. It was then that we started noticing the signs. The beams from our flashlights flickered unpredictably. Our radios, which we used to keep in touch with our surface contact, began emitting static. And then we heard the sounds, a faint echo that resembled footsteps, the soft rustling of movement from the shadows beyond our light. We were no longer alone. Feeling unnerved but equally intrigued, we decided to push on. It was when we stumbled upon an old, decaying metro car in the depths of this unknown tunnel that things turned from eerie to downright terrifying. Inside the metro car, we found belongings, wallets, clothes, even old metro tickets, scattered around, all appearing to belong to the vanished passengers from decades past. Our dread grew when we realized the metro car door was jammed from the outside, as if something or someone had intentionally trapped the passengers within. The discovery triggered a wave of fear among us. The unexplained sounds grew louder, the temperature dropped even further, and we felt an indescribable pressure surrounding us. Deciding we'd delved deep enough, we made a hasty retreat. Our journey back was fraught with terror as the sounds seemed to follow us, the whispers growing into discernible words, pleading for help, crying in despair. We surfaced at dawn, shaken, and reported our findings to the local authorities. Even now, I shiver as I recount our experience, our daring descent into a forgotten chapter of our city's history. There's no denying that we stumbled upon something horrifying in the underbelly, a truth that had been swallowed by time and bureaucracy. What was supposed to be an exploration turned into a chilling discovery, a brush with the grim remnants of past souls who were still crying out for rescue. I share this account not as a thrilling tale, but as a stark reality we unearthed in the heart of our city.
I moved to Luren's Cove 8 months ago, a small, isolated town tucked away on the northern coastline. It's one of those places where everybody knows everyone else, and outsiders are a rarity. I was looking for a quiet place to start anew, away from the city's frenzy, and Luren's Cove seemed perfect. Shortly after settling in, I learned about the town's unsettling tradition. Every 7 years, a dense, almost palpable fog blankets the town. Coinciding with this event, a town resident mysteriously vanishes, never to be seen again. No trace, no leads, just gone. As bizarre as this sounded, the town accepted it with grim resignation, considering it part of their lore. However, I couldn't overlook it. My journalist instincts kicked in, and I saw a story that needed to be unearthed. With the 7th year fast approaching, I delved into the town's archives, reaching out to old-timers, trying to piece together the puzzle. Stories varied, but one common thread was the fog. It was always described as unnatural, unsettling, an entity in itself. The disappearances were accepted as inevitable, a sacrifice to the fog. When the 7th year finally arrived, I witnessed it firsthand. The fog was unlike anything I'd seen, so thick that it reduced visibility to near zero, leaving the town eerily quiet. The cold dread was palpable among the townsfolk, but there was an unspoken agreement not to interfere. Just let it pass. Then it happened. Another resident vanished without a trace. Emily, a kind woman in her 60s, was gone. The next morning, her house stood empty, her cat wandering around the front yard waiting for a master who would never return. The town mourned, but they moved on. However, I couldn't let it go. Digging deeper, I discovered a century-old journal in the town's records, hidden away like a forbidden secret. It belonged to the town's founder, a sea captain named Luren. The entries revealed a shocking truth. Luren had made a pact with a sea entity, promising a human tribute every 7 years in exchange for prosperity. Suddenly it all made sense. The thriving fishing industry despite the town's isolation, the acceptance of the tragic cycle, the unnatural fog, and the disappearances. It wasn't just folklore. It was a pact that the town was bound to. In the weeks following Emily's disappearance, I felt a growing urgency. The town had slipped back into its routine. The incident was fading into memory like those before it, and I couldn't help but wonder who would be next. The shocking revelations from Captain Luren's journal were heavy on my mind. I was an outsider, a newcomer, but these people were my neighbors, and I felt a responsibility to disrupt this eerie cycle. So I decided to expose the truth. Armed with the century-old journal as my primary evidence, I meticulously compiled my research. I scanned pages, recorded testimonies from the elders who were willing to talk, and gathered historical weather reports that corroborated the occurrence of the unnatural fog. It was crucial to present the evidence in a manner that was undeniable, yet sensitive to the town's history and beliefs. Once I had everything together, I decided to call a town meeting. There was hesitation, a palpable tension in the air when I announced my intent, but the innate curiosity that thrives in small communities prevailed. The town hall was filled with anxious faces on the decided day. Standing in front of the crowd, I felt a wave of doubt. These were people who had lived with this phenomenon their entire lives, accepted it as part of their existence. But as I looked into their apprehensive eyes, I knew I owed them the truth. As I unveiled the evidence piece by piece, a silence descended upon the room. The journal entries, the timelines of disappearances matching the 7-year cycle, testimonials of residents, all painted a disturbing picture. The room was eerily silent when I finally finished, the reality of their tradition exposed in a stark new light. There was resistance, of course. Many refused to believe, labeling it as a sensationalized theory of an outsider. But many others, especially the younger generation, were shocked, angered, and scared. They questioned their elders, demanded answers and change. In the following weeks, Luren's Cove was a town divided. Discussions and debates were common, and an underlying current of fear and anger brewed. I was vilified by many, but others thanked me, their expressions revealing a heartbreaking mix of fear and relief. The town is still grappling with the truth. It's an uphill battle, challenging ingrained traditions and facing the implications of the unearthed secret. The once isolated town has attracted regional media attention, and authorities have been notified, their investigations ongoing. I don't know what the future holds for Luren's Cove, but the foggy shroud of accepted disappearances is slowly lifting. It's a beginning, a chance for the town to break free from its eerie pact. As for me, I've become a part of the story, an unexpected protagonist in the town's history, trying to bring about a change that was centuries overdue.
That's all for now. However, we extend an invitation, wrapped in the cloak of intrigue, for you to join us as we journey into realms of deliciously spine-chilling exploits. So, if you enjoyed this story and want to hear more like it, please subscribe now. Thanks and see you next time. That's all for now. However, we extend